The Mississippi Delta slept uneasily that summer night of 1853, as though the land itself was holding its breath. Heavy fog rolled off the Yazoo River, draping the swamp cypresses in veils of ghost-white mist. Every frog's croak, every whippoorwill's cry, sounded like a warning whispered through the reeds. The moon hung low, swollen and red, the color of old wounds not yet healed. Josiah moved silently through the cane fields, the weight of the day's labor still on his shoulders. His shirt clung to his back, the air thick enough to drink. The whip marks from last week's punishment still burned faintly when he lifted his arm, though he had learned to hide the pain. Behind him, a chorus of insects pulsed in rhythm with his heart. He stopped where the sugarcane met the water's edge, where the master's eyes didn't reach, and waited. Then she came. Lila appeared like a memory summoned by moonlight, her white kerchief glowing faintly in the dark. She carried no lamp, she didn't need one. Josiah always said the river itself lit her path. When she smiled, even the mist seemed to retreat. "You shouldn't be here this late," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "Old Silas seen patrol riding through not 2 hours past." Josiah stepped forward, took her hands. "Ain't no patrol gonna stop me seeing my wife. They done took near everything else, but not this." His voice trembled, part love, part defiance. The sound of the water lapping against the bank filled the silence between them. For a long while, neither spoke. Lila leaned against his chest, feeling the slow thunder of his heart. Around them, fireflies blinked in slow, mournful patterns, like tiny spirits keeping watch. She finally said, "You hear what folks sayin'? About the river? About them strange lights out past the bend?" Josiah nodded. "I hear. They say the river restless, say the dead ain't sleepin' right." She shivered. "Mama Odette say, it's a sign. She say the land remember what been done to it. Blood don't sink too deep, it can't call back." Josiah's jaw tightened. He had seen Mama Odette before, the old conjure woman who lived deep in the swamp, where the cypress roots curled like fingers. The white folks said she was the devil's wife. The slaves said she was the river's voice. He didn't know which to believe. All he knew was that when she looked at you, she saw everything, every sin, every secret, every sorrow you tried to bury. "Let the river remember," he muttered. "Maybe it's time somebody did." Lila looked up at him, worry soft in her eyes. "Don't talk like that. You know the master don't need much to find reason for lash." She touched his cheek. "Promise me you ain't gonna do nothing foolish." Josiah almost smiled, but the weight in his chest wouldn't let it through. Ain't no foolish when a man got nothing left to lose. They stood like that for a while, the quiet broken only by the slow hum of the river and the sigh of the cane leaves. In the distance, a dog barked once, sharp and lonely. Somewhere far off, thunder grumbled, though the sky above them was clear. Lila pressed her forehead against his chest. "Sometimes I dream we gone. Somewhere north, where the air don't smell like sweat and sorrow." He ran his hand down her braid. "Keep dreamin', Lila. Dream's the only thing they can't chain." From the trees beyond the field, a shadow stirred, small, bent, but heavy with presence. Mama Odette watched them from the swamp's edge, her face half hidden beneath a red scarf. The glow of her lantern shimmered on the surface of the river. She hummed a low, tuneless melody that the wind carried just enough for Josiah to feel it crawl across his skin. The melody wasn't of this world, old, African, older than pain itself. Lila stiffened. "She watching us." Josiah turned. But by then the swamp was still again. She watch everybody, the river's eyes don't close. The moonlight broke through a gap in the clouds, flooding the water in silver. For a moment, the reflection of the two of them, husband and wife, shimmered beside a third figure, tall and unseen, standing between them and the river's heart. Josiah blinked, and the vision was gone. "Come," Lila whispered. "Let's go back, for someone notice." They walked hand in hand along the narrow path, their footsteps muffled by the wet ground. As they neared the cabins, a sudden rustle came from the darkness. A voice, smooth, sharp, and too confident, slid through the night like a blade. "Well now, ain't this a sight?" They froze. Master Caldwell stepped from behind a willow, his silhouette framed by the lantern he carried. His face gleamed with sweat and rum. He was a man who looked carved from privilege, tall, square-jawed, the kind of beauty that masked rot beneath the surface. He stared at Lila longer than he should have, then smiled in a way that made Josiah's stomach twist. "Evening, Josiah." "Lila." His voice dripped with a false kindness. "You two enjoying the Lord's moonlight together?" Josiah lowered his gaze, forcing his voice steady. "Just taking a moment after the day's work, sir." Caldwell took a slow step closer. "Pretty thing, your wife. Surprised I ain't noticed before." His eyes didn't leave her. "You keep her well?" Lila's fingers tightened around Josiah's hand. She tried to curtsy, her voice barely audible. "Yes, sir." Caldwell smirked, savoring the discomfort. "Good. I like seeing my property looked after." Josiah's jaw locked. His heart pounded with a rage he dared not show. "We best be heading back, sir." Caldwell took another step, close enough now that Josiah could smell the whiskey on his breath. "You'll head back when I say you will." The silence that followed was heavy as the swamp air. Even the crickets stopped. Then Caldwell's grin returned. "You've done fine work this harvest, Josiah. Think I might have use for you near the main house for a spell. Bring your wife, too. Could use a touch of beauty round the place." Lila's breath caught. Josiah's stomach turned cold. He wanted to speak, to protest, but one look at the pistol gleaming on Caldwell's belt ended that thought. Caldwell tipped his hat. "See you come morning." He walked off toward the house, lantern bobbing like a willow, the wisp in the fog. When he disappeared into the trees, Josiah turned toward Lila. She was trembling. "Josiah," she whispered. "What do you mean by that?" Josiah stared at the direction the master had gone, his fists closing slowly until the blood left his knuckles. The moonlight caught his eyes, and for the first time they looked more like the river's than a man's. "He mean trouble," Josiah said softly, "and I mean to end it." The river gurgled, low and hungry, as if answering a promise. Morning came slow to the Caldwell plantation, the kind of dawn that burned red through the mist like embers smoldering beneath ash. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and molasses, and the whippoorwills were still calling when the overseer's horn sounded. Men and women dragged themselves from their cabins, eyes dull with sleep and sorrow, feet bare in the mud. Josiah rose from his cot, the boards creaking beneath him. Lila sat at the edge, her fingers wrapped around the small wooden cross she wore on a string. She didn't speak, but he saw the fear in her eyes, that quiet, knowing fear that never needed words. He cupped her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You stay close to the cabins today," he said low. "Don't wander none." Lila shook her head slowly. "He said for me to come. You heard him, same as I did." Josiah's jaw clenched. He wanted to tear the world apart to keep her from that house, but he knew better than to fight what he couldn't yet reach. "Then I'll be there too," he said. "Won't let him keep you out of my sight." She smiled weakly, touching his cheek. "You can't stop a storm by standing in the rain, Josiah." He didn't answer. Instead he rose, pulled on his torn shirt, and stepped outside. The morning light hit his face like judgment. By mid-morning, the main house stood ahead of him, whitewashed wood and greed disguised as grace. Spanish moss dripped from the trees like old lace. Inside, the air smelled of tobacco, sweat, and rose oil. Josiah stood at the foot of the porch, hat in hand, as the butler, another slave, gray-haired and stooped, nodded for him to wait. Master Caldwell's voice drifted through the parlor window, laughing over the clink of a whiskey glass. "She's got a certain charm about her," he was saying. "Not the usual kind either, something wild, untamed." Another man laughed, one of Caldwell's guests, no doubt. "You best be careful, Henry. The Lord don't smile on a man coveting what's already his." Caldwell chuckled. "The Lord been smiling on me all my life. Reckon he can forgive a little admiration." The men's laughter rolled through the air like thunder. Josiah stood still, each word carving itself deeper into him. Moments later, the front door opened. Caldwell stepped out, shirt open at the neck, gold chain glinting in the light. He looked down at Josiah with a wolf's smile. "Ah, there you are. Fetch your wife. The missus wants her help in the house today." "Yes, sir," Josiah replied, though the words burned in his mouth. "Oh, and Josiah," Caldwell added, leaning against a post, "see that she wears something decent. The mistress likes things presentable." He turned and went back inside, the door closing with a soft, final thud. By noon, Lila stood at the back entrance of the big house, wearing the pale cotton dress Caldwell's wife had once cast aside. It was too fine for her, too white, too clean, and it made her look like she didn't belong to this world at all. Josiah worked in the yard nearby, mending the wagon wheel, his eyes never straying far. He could see her through the window, moving quiet and graceful, her hands folding linens under the mistress's gaze. But every now and then, Caldwell would pass through the room, lingering too long, his eyes trailing where they shouldn't. Each glance was a theft, each smile a threat. By late afternoon, the mistress had retired for her nap, and the house grew still. The cicadas hummed outside, a steady, feverish sound that filled the air like heat. Lila was alone in the dining room, polishing the silver. She didn't hear the footsteps until they were too close. Caldwell's reflection appeared behind her in the mirror. "Didn't know a slave could shine silver so pretty," he said softly, his tone dipped in honey but stinking of poison. She turned, clutching the cloth. "Master Caldwell, I—" He took a step closer, his shadow falling over her. "No need to be afraid, girl. I just come to thank you. You've brought a certain light into this house." Lila's heart raced. "I just doing what I told, sir." Caldwell smiled, a serpent's smile. "And you do it well." He reached out, touching a lock of her hair that had slipped free from her kerchief. She flinched, stepping back. "Please, sir, the mistress." He caught her wrist. "The mistress asleep. You worry too much." Her breath caught in her throat. For a moment, neither moved, the air thick, the world holding still. Then, from the hallway, the faint creak of a floorboard broke the spell. Caldwell released her hand, his expression darkening. "You tell no one," he said low. "Not a word." Lila nodded, trembling. He straightened, smoothing his shirt as though nothing had happened. "You'll come again tomorrow, early." Then he was gone. Lila stood frozen, her chest tight, the cloth fallen to the floor. Her hands shook as she pressed them to her face. The silver gleamed beside her, cold, heartless, bright as judgment. Outside, Josiah saw her emerge from the house, her steps uneven, eyes fixed on the ground. He rushed to her, but she brushed past him, saying nothing. "Lila, don't," she whispered, her voice hollow. "Just don't." He watched her walk toward the cabins, and something inside him cracked, a soundless shattering that went deeper than bone. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat by the fire outside their cabin, staring into the flames until they blurred. The frogs croaked, the river whispered, and somewhere in the swamp, a drum began to beat, slow, distant, calling. He rose, drawn by the sound. His feet carried him down the narrow path to the water's edge, where the mist curled like breath. Mama Odette was waiting. She stood barefoot in the mud, eyes glowing like coals. Her hands were painted with ash and salt, her hair wrapped in red cloth. She didn't speak at first, she didn't have to. The air itself spoke through her. "You come," she said finally, her voice low and thick with the swamp's breath. "The river call you, and you listen." Josiah stared, his heart hammering. "He took something from me," he said. "Something ain't his to take." Odette nodded slowly. "Then the river owe him debt." "I want it back," Josiah said, his voice trembling with fury. "I want justice." She smiled faintly, a smile that had no mercy in it. "Justice," she whispered. "No, child. What you want ain't justice. It's balance." From the dark water behind her, bubbles rose, bursting softly on the surface. The smell of iron filled the air. "Balance cost," she said. "You ready to pay?" Josiah didn't flinch. "I done paid all my life." Odette closed her eyes, lifted her arms, and began to chant. The river stirred. Somewhere deep beneath the surface, something old awakened, something that had waited too long to be called. The water rippled at Josiah's feet, and he felt it cold, alive, listening. Odette opened her eyes. "Then let the river take what's owed." The night swallowed them both. Dawn broke with a grey stillness, the kind that carried no promise of light. The fields steamed beneath the early mist, and the smell of damp cane filled the air like memory. Josiah woke to find Lila already up, sitting by the hearth, her hands motionless in her lap. Her eyes were empty, as though something sacred inside her had been stolen in the night and left no shadow behind. He knelt beside her. "Lila, talk to me." She didn't turn. The fire popped, casting trembling light across her face. "Ain't nothing to say," she murmured. "Words don't fix what done broke." Josiah clenched his fists, the raw skin of his palms burning where the rope scars crossed. He hurt you, didn't he? Her lips trembled, but she didn't answer. The silence said enough. Josiah rose suddenly, the rage in him like a tide that could no longer be held back. He kicked over the stool, his breath ragged. He think he can take what's mine and walk free? His voice cracked through the room like thunder. He think 'cause I wear chains, I ain't a man no more? Lila finally looked at him, her eyes wet but steady. You can't fight him, Josiah. Not and live. He turned on her, chest heaving. Then maybe livin' ain't worth the price no more. She stood, grabbing his arm. Don't talk that way. Don't make the river take you too. He looked at her, then really looked. She was shaking, her strength a thin thread pulled taut. He took her face in his hands, his thumb brushing away a tear that refused to fall. He already took what he wanted, Lila. Now I'm gonna take what he fear. That afternoon, the sun came out blazing hot, baking the mud into cracks. The plantation pulsed with forced rhythm, hose striking, chains clinking, overseer's whip slicing the air. Josiah worked among the others, body moving but mind elsewhere. His hands bled, but he didn't feel it. Every motion was mechanical, like a drumbeat driving him toward something inevitable. The overseer, Hammond, eyed him warily. You looking to make trouble, boy? Josiah didn't answer. He lifted another sack, his silence more dangerous than words. By sundown, he was gone. The path through the swamp was hidden except to those who knew its breath. The murmur of frogs, the whisper of reeds, the way the ground pulsed soft beneath bare feet. Josiah followed it until the land itself seemed to close around him. Cypress trees loomed like watchful ghosts, and the air hung heavy with decay and incense. He found Mama Odette kneeling beside a shallow pool, her reflection rippling in the water like a second spirit. The surface of the pool shimmered, showing glimpses of things that weren't there, faces, memories, wounds. She didn't look up when he arrived. You bring her silence, she said. Josiah frowned. What you mean? The woman's heart speaks in silence, child. You hear it. You carry it. She dipped her fingers into the water. Now the river hear it too. The pool darkened, turning red like wine. What it want from me? Josiah asked. Odette's eyes lifted, gleaming in the half-light. Blood for blood, but not yours. The river never drink what still got mercy in it. He felt the chill crawl through him. You mean his? Odette nodded slowly. He took, now he pay. But river don't take clean. It make messy, make loud. You ready for that? Josiah's face hardened. Let it roar. She smiled, a slow, dreadful smile. Then it begin. She drew a circle of ash on the ground and placed in its center a small wooden carving, a man bound by serpents. She sprinkled crushed bone over it, humming a melody that trembled through the air. The ground shuddered faintly, as though the swamp itself was breathing beneath them. Odette's voice deepened. Say his name. Henry Caldwell. Again. Henry Caldwell. A third time, louder. Henry Caldwell. The wind tore through the trees. The water hissed and bubbled. Odette threw her arms wide, shouting words older than the land, and from the pool rose a shape, half mist, half shadow, coiling upward like smoke from a grave. It turned its faceless head toward Josiah. He hear you now, Odette whispered. Josiah felt the world tilt. The shadow leaned close, its form pulsing with the sound of a heartbeat, not his own, but another's. Caldwell's. Odette's chant grew faster, feverish. Go, river child. Take what been stolen. The shadow vanished into the night, its echo sinking into the earth like a secret swallowed whole. By the time Josiah returned to the quarters, the wind had changed. The air carried a smell of rain and iron. He lay beside Lila, though neither spoke. Sleep came heavy and strange. In the dead of night, thunder cracked, but there was no storm. Caldwell woke in his bed, sweat slicking his skin. The curtains fluttered, though the windows were shut. He sat up, heart pounding, and reached for the lamp. The flame sputtered, then steadied, casting light on something moving in the corner of the room. A shape, too dark to be shadow, too solid to be smoke. Who's there? His voice broke. Show yourself. The shape didn't move at first. Then slowly, it turned, a figure slick with water, face pale and eyeless, dripping river mud onto the carpet. Caldwell staggered back, knocking over the table. Get out! You hear me? Get out! The figure took a step forward, the sound wet and heavy, leaving footprints that steamed against the floor. The smell of rot filled the room. Caldwell grabbed his pistol from the drawer, firing once, twice, but the bullets only hissed through mist. The figure reached the edge of the bed, bent low, and whispered something in a voice like rushing water. "Debt due," Caldwell screamed. The servants found him at dawn, sprawled on the floor, his skin clammy and cold, eyes wide as if he'd seen the river swallow the world. The doctor called it a fit of the heart. The slaves called it justice. Josiah said nothing. He only looked toward the swamp, where the fog still rose thicker, darker, alive. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Lila sat by the riverbank, her fingers trailing in the water. "It done?" she asked softly. Josiah nodded. "He gone." She looked at him, truly looked, and saw something different in his eyes. Not peace, not joy, just the hollow stillness of a man who had called something he couldn't uncall. Mama Odette's voice drifted through the reeds. "The river never finish what it start. It just wait." The water lapped gently at the bank, whispering a promise neither of them wanted to understand. The morning after Caldwell's death was unnaturally bright. The sun burned white through the haze, and the air hung heavy with the smell of churned mud and decay. The plantation buzzed like a disturbed hive, whispers on every porch, eyes shifting, overseers uneasy. Caldwell's body had been carried to the parlor, laid out beneath the gilt-framed portrait of his father. His skin had taken on a faint bluish hue, lips cracked, eyes sealed only halfway. No one dared say it aloud, but every slave who passed the house that morning whispered the same word under their breath: river. Josiah kept to the fields, though his mind wasn't there. The sweat on his back stung like guilt. Every time he blinked, he saw Caldwell's face twisted, frozen, and silent. The memory didn't bring peace, only the knowledge that the river's balance was never clean. By midday, 2 carriages arrived from town. The sheriff and the preacher stepped out, hats in hand, their expressions rehearsed. The mistress, pale, trembling, her mourning veil trembling with each breath, stood at the porch, pretending grief, she half believed. The preacher muttered prayers, but his eyes darted toward the windows, as though afraid something might be watching from the shadows. The sheriff, a broad man with a scarred cheek, leaned close to him. "You seen how his skin looked? Like he'd been pulled out the river, though he never left his bed." The preacher swallowed hard. "Some things best left to God's mystery, or the devil's," the sheriff replied. Josiah heard them from where he worked near the cane rows, pretending to hoe. His hands trembled. Every rustle of reeds sounded like a whisper calling his name. That night, the swamp came alive again. Crickets stilled. The air thickened. Lila tossed restlessly beside him, murmuring in her sleep. Josiah rose and stepped outside, the moonlight painting his skin silver. The river shimmered like black glass. He could almost see faces moving beneath its surface, Caldwell's among them, mouth open, eyes wide, reaching. He knelt by the edge. "It done," he whispered. "You got what you came for." The water rippled, not from wind, not from fish. It pulsed, slow and deliberate, as if the river itself was breathing. "You promised balance," Josiah said. "Now let us be." The reeds shivered. From behind him came the faint rustle of feet on wet soil. He turned. Mama Odette stood there, her red scarf fluttering like flame in the night wind. "The river don't make promises," she said softly. "It take what it want. You just gave it reason." Josiah's jaw tightened. "Then what it want now?" Odette's gaze drifted toward the cabins, where dim candlelight flickered through cracks in the wood. "It want what's still tied to him. The debt don't end with breath." He stared at her. "You mean Lila?" Odette didn't answer. Her silence was worse than any curse. "No," he said, rising to his feet. "You tell it no." Her eyes glowed faintly, a reflection of something far older than her flesh. "You call it, child. You opened the way. Now it walk where it please." He stepped toward her, fists shaking. "I did this for her." She didn't move. "Then pray she forgive you when the river come for its due." The wind shifted suddenly, carrying a cold mist off the water. Odette was gone. Only the faint scent of salt and smoke lingered. Josiah turned back toward the cabins, running. Inside, Lila sat upright on their bed, breathing hard. The candle beside her flickered, though there was no draught. Shadows crawled up the walls, shapes forming and unforming, faces, hands, echoes of something unseen. "Josiah?" she whispered. He burst through the door, chest heaving. "Pack what you can. We goin' north. Tonight." She stared at him, eyes wide. What happened? The river, it ain't done. Her hands went to her mouth. You said it was over. I thought it was, he said. God help me, I thought it was. She rose, trembling. Where we go? Ain't no road safe for us. Better to die tryin' than stay for what's comin'. He grabbed her hand, but the floor beneath them groaned a long, deep moan, as if the earth itself had drawn breath. The candle guttered and went out. The sound that followed wasn't human. It was wet, gurgling, ancient. Josiah froze. A line of water began to creep under the door, thin at first, then thickening, black and cold. It moved with purpose, slithering toward them like a living thing. Lila screamed, pulling back, but Josiah stepped in front of her. The water stopped at his feet, swirling, rising. Within it, faintly, Caldwell's voice echoed, distorted, bubbling. You called me. Josiah's heart pounded. You got what you earned. Go back. The water surged upward, striking him in the chest, throwing him against the wall. The room filled with a sharp scent of mud and decay. Lila shouted his name, clutching at him, but the water coiled around his legs like shackles. Then, just as suddenly, it stilled. A whisper filled the air. One must return. The water dropped to the floor, soaking into the wood as if it had never been. Josiah fell to his knees, gasping. Lila knelt beside him, trembling. Josiah, what it mean? He didn't answer. His eyes had gone distant, unfocused. It mean the river ain't done takin'. By sunrise, the overseer's horn sounded again, but the plantation felt wrong, too quiet, too watchful. The mistress had locked herself in her room, refusing to look upon her husband's coffin again. The sheriff said the burial would happen that afternoon. Josiah watched from the fields as they carried the box down to the family plot near the river. The soil there was soft, always damp. The slaves whispered that nothing buried near that water stayed buried long. He felt the pull, faint but real, tugging at the back of his mind, like the river itself was whispering through his blood. That night, as the final shovelful of dirt covered Caldwell's grave, the river rose. Thunder rolled across the delta, though no rain fell. The trees swayed under wind that came from nowhere. Lila stood at the window of their cabin, staring out at the flickering lanterns near the burial ground. Josiah, she whispered. Something movin'. He came to her side. Through the glass they saw the earth tremble, the grave sinking slightly, the mud rippling outward like water disturbed. Then came the sound, a low, guttural groan, half breath, half scream rising from beneath the ground. The men who stood watch ran, their lamps swinging wildly. The grave split open. Water gushed upward, spraying black and thick, and something rose with it, not flesh, not bone, but shape. A body of river muck, half man, half shadow, crawling toward the waterline. Caldwell's face pale, eyeless flickered within it, then dissolved. Lila screamed. Josiah grabbed her arm. We run now. They burst into the night, sprinting through the cane rows, the sound of rushing water behind them. The river was rising, unnaturally fast, devouring the banks. Behind them, the plantation lights went out one by one. They reached the swamp edge, breath ragged. Lila turned, eyes wide with tears. Where we go, Josiah? Where the earth itself ain't cursed. He looked toward the mist, where the water glowed faintly red under the moonlight. Nowhere safe, he said. Not till the river take what it want. And from the distance came Mama Odette's voice, echoing through the cypress trees. The river take its own, child. Always its own. The current roared in answer, pulling them closer. The morning after the burning, the plantation moved like a body in shock, its heart still beating, but its breath uncertain. Ash clung to the fields like frost. The chapel was nothing but charred ribs of timber, pointing toward a sky that refused to brighten. Smoke curled from the ruins, and in the air hung a smell not entirely of wood. Josiah stood at the edge of what used to be the porch. The air shimmered with heat, even though the fire had died hours ago. Lila's scarf, a pale scrap of cotton, lay half buried in the soot. He bent to pick it up, fingers trembling. The fabric was singed along the edges, but the center still held her scent, faint but alive. She ain't gone, came a voice behind him. Josiah turned. It was old Papa Moses, his face streaked with soot, his eyes bloodshot. You hear me, boy? The old man rasped. Fire don't take what belonged to the river. It just sent it back. Josiah swallowed hard. What you mean? Moses limped closer, leaning on his cane. I seen the marks by the tree line. Footsteps, 2 of them. One small, one dragon heavy. They went toward the bayou. Hope flickered, fragile as a candle in wind. She alive? The old man nodded once, slow. Maybe. But she touched the river now. Ain't the same after that. Josiah looked toward the swamp. The mist was thick and pulsing, as if breathing in rhythm with his heartbeat. Then I'll bring her back, he said, even if it mean walking through hell to do it. By nightfall, he was deep within the cypress maze again. The air buzzed with mosquitoes and the hum of unseen things. Every step sent ripples through the black water. The moon floated above him like a cracked coin, its reflection bending in the swamp's uneasy surface. He followed the sound of drums, faint, hollow, but there. They came from somewhere deeper than the land itself, where the swamp widened into a place that didn't belong to daylight. There, half hidden under roots and bones, stood an altar of mud and skulls. Candles burned in jars. Feathers swayed from branches, tied with hair and scraps of red cloth. And before it knelt Lila, her dress was soaked to the waist, her hands trembling as she traced symbols into the dirt. Her eyes were open but far away, unfocused, like she was listening to something Josiah couldn't hear. Lila, he whispered. She didn't move. He stepped closer, the muck sucking at his boots. Lila, it's me. Still nothing. Only when he touched her shoulder did she flinch, gasping as though waking from drowning. She turned, tears streaming down her soot-streaked face. Josiah? Her voice broke on his name. I tried to stop it. He held her close, but her body was cold, trembling. You ain't gotta say nothin'. You safe now? No, she said, pulling back. It ain't done. It's still hungry. From the shadows, her low laugh rolled like thunder. Josiah spun, reaching instinctively for the knife in his belt. Mama Odette emerged from behind the altar, her eyes glinting like oil. You call something you don't understand, boy. You pay for it twice. Josiah squared his shoulders. I ain't afraid of you. She smiled, slow and terrible. You should be. The candles flickered violently, their flames bending toward Josiah as if drawn by breath. The ground pulsed underfoot. From the pool behind the altar, bubbles broke the surface. The smell of rot and iron filled the air. Lila clutched Josiah's arm. It's him, she whispered. He ain't gone. Josiah's heart pounded. Caldwell's dead. Odette's grin widened. You think death stop a curse? River took his soul, but it spit back what it didn't like. He comin' for what he still claim. The pool churned harder, the water rising in twisting shapes, faces forming, dissolving, forming again. The surface split open, and something crawled out, a figure slick with black mud, eyes glowing faint white beneath a face that wasn't a face anymore. Caldwell, or what was left of him. Josiah stepped in front of Lila, his knife gleaming. You stay behind me. The thing that had been Caldwell turned its head, bones cracking. Its voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. You called me slave. You brought me back. I brought justice. Josiah spat. The creature tilted its head. Then taste it. It lunged. Josiah slashed, the blade slicing through mist and muck, hitting something solid beneath. The creature howled, the sound twisting the air like thunder underwater. Lila screamed as the candles blew out, plunging them into darkness lit only by lightning flashing through the trees. Odette began to chant again, faster this time, the same old words, but heavier, darker. The swamp responded. The roots moved, twisting up like serpents, wrapping around the creature's legs. It thrashed, roaring. The air itself vibrated. Josiah drove the knife deep into its chest. Go back, he shouted. Go back to the river. The creature's scream split the night, echoing across the swamp like a death bell. For a moment, Josiah saw his reflection in its pale, glowing eyes, not as a man, but as something else, a vessel of vengeance, burning with power that didn't belong to him. Then the creature fell backward into the pool. The water boiled, then stilled. Silence. Only Odette's ragged breathing broke it. She sank to her knees, eyes wide, staring at the rippling water. You did what no man was meant to, she whispered. You broke the chain. Josiah dropped the knife, chest heaving. "It's done." She shook her head. "It's never done. You think you killed a man, but you just woke a god." They left the swamp before dawn, Lila leaning on him, her body weak but alive. Behind them, the mist rose higher than before, curling into shapes that looked almost human, as if the swamp itself had begun to remember. When they reached the field's edge, the horizon glowed with a new light, not the sun, but something red, alive, and wrong. Lila clutched Josiah's hand tighter. "What we do now?" she asked. He looked back at the forest, where the shadows moved even without wind. "We wait," he said, "and pray it stay where it belong." But deep down, he knew the river never stayed quiet for long. The storm came 2 nights later, not born of weather, but of something older. The sky turned the color of bruised iron, and lightning clawed the horizon, as if the heavens themselves were trying to tear open the earth. The Mississippi churned like a living beast, swallowing moonlight whole. Josiah and Lila huddled in the cabin, the fire snapping weakly against the wind. She sat close, her hands wrapped in a wet cloth. Her lips were pale, eyes hollow from sleepless nights. Ever since that night in the swamp, she had not spoken of what she'd seen, but sometimes, when the air went still, her head would turn suddenly, as though listening to whispers no one else could hear. "Something watchin'," she murmured now, barely audible. Josiah tightened his grip on her hand. "It just the wind." She shook her head. "No, it breathin'." A low rumble came from outside. Not thunder, heavier, slower. The horses cried out from the stable, hooves striking wood in panic. Then came the smell, wet iron and rot. Josiah rose, grabbed the axe from the corner. He pushed the door open. The wind howled through like a voice. Across the yard, near the edge of the cane field, the fog thickened. From within it, something shimmered faint, pulsing light like lanterns under water. Then, shapes began to move, dozens of them. Figures. They came stumbling through the mist, covered in riverweed and mud, their faces slack, eyes glowing pale. They dragged chains behind them, broken links, clinking faintly as they walked. Josiah's breath caught. "Lord in heaven!" Mama Odette's warning rang in his mind. "You woke a god." He stepped backward. The figures stopped at the edge of the yard. One, taller than the rest, lifted its head, and through the rain, Josiah saw the ruined face of Henry Caldwell, or what was left of him. His skin was cracked like old clay, his eyes white as salt. When he spoke, his voice came through water, bubbling, distorted. "You thought the river done with me, boy." Josiah lifted the axe. "You ain't supposed to be here." Caldwell smiled, a grotesque curve of split lips. "You called me back. You gave me blood. Now I'm what you made." The others began to moan, low, rhythmic, like a chant. The ground trembled. The air smelled of rust and ash. Lila screamed inside the cabin. Josiah stepped forward, his rage cutting through fear. "You took my wife. You took my soul. I ain't bowing again." Caldwell raised his arms, and the spirits moved. The first one lunged a man Josiah recognized, one of the field hands buried years ago after being beaten for stealing corn. His eyes were full of water, his jaw half gone. Josiah swung the axe, splitting through bone and mud alike. The creature fell, but another rose in its place. "Josiah!" Lila cried. He turned just in time to see Caldwell reach the porch. The thing's hands were blackened bone wrapped in flesh that oozed water. Josiah charged, swinging. The axe buried deep into the thing's chest, but instead of dying, Caldwell leaned closer, his grin stretching impossibly wide. "You can't kill what you already damned." Lightning struck the field. The chains on the ground snapped tight, slithering toward Josiah's legs. He stumbled, struggling to break free, but they wound higher, burning cold against his skin. Inside, Lila clutched the small wooden carving. Mama Odette had once given her the man bound by serpents. She whispered the chant she'd overheard that night in the swamp, the one Odette had used to summon the river's shadow. The chains froze. Caldwell looked up sharply. "What is that?" The carving began to glow red. The air shifted and the smell of swamp water filled the cabin. The window burst open, and a gust of wind snuffed out the fire. Odette's voice, or something wearing her voice, filled the room. "Debt never paid in half." The carving cracked. Lila threw it into the storm. The earth shuddered. The spirits screamed. Caldwell stumbled backward. his body twitching violently as if pulled by unseen ropes. The chains that bound Josiah turned red hot, then disintegrated into ash. "Lila!" Josiah shouted. "Don't stop!" She dropped to her knees, chanting faster, her voice raw. The ground beneath Caldwell split open, black water gushing up in torrents. He reached toward Josiah, his eyes burning white. "I'll never die," Josiah roared back, lifting the axe. "Then drown forever." He swung, cleaving through Caldwell's skull. The impact sent a burst of black water and steam into the air. The storm seemed to scream, a sound of 10,000 drowned souls crying at once. The bodies around them crumbled, melting into the mud. The chains dissolved, and silence followed, heavy, final. The rain slowed. The clouds began to thin. Josiah dropped to his knees, gasping, soaked to the bone. Lila crawled to him, clutching his face in her trembling hands. "It's done," she whispered. "It got to be done." He looked toward the field. The fog was gone. Only the smell of wet earth remained. "Maybe," he said, voice low. "But he said we made him. If we did, what that make us?" Lila had no answer. Above them, the thunder faded into distance, rolling toward the river. The last flash of lightning illuminated the chapel's ruins, and there, for just a breath, Josiah thought he saw a figure standing amid the ashes. Not Caldwell. Not Odette. A tall shadow, crowned in reeds, eyes like cold moons, watching. Then it vanished. That night, they buried the broken axe near the roots of an old cypress tree. Neither spoke of what happened, but as they walked back toward the cabins, Josiah could swear he heard footsteps behind them, slow, wet, and patient. The river wasn't done watching. Morning rose heavy, the air thick with the smell of wet cane and decay. The storm had passed, but the land hadn't recovered it, pulsed like something wounded, bleeding beneath its own soil. Every puddle shimmered dark, reflecting the bruised sky. The Mississippi ran slower, but not calmer. Its surface boiled in strange circles, as if something just beneath it refused to rest. Josiah and Lila walked the rows of ruined crops, their clothes still damp, their skin cold despite the sun. The overseer's house was empty, its windows black with smoke. What was left of Caldwell's domain stood in silence, a plantation without a master, haunted by the echoes of his sin. Lila bent down, touching the dirt. "It ain't just the field that's dead," she whispered. "The ground itself remembers." Josiah nodded, his voice low. "It remember everything. What buried, what burned, what screamed." They turned toward the quarters. The people were gathered outside, quiet, staring. Papa Moses stood near the front, hat clutched in his hands. When he saw Josiah, he shuffled forward, eyes wide and uncertain. "Boy," he rasped. "We seen things last night. Lights in the swamp, voices calling from the water." Josiah's chest tightened. "Voices?" "Sounded like children," Moses said. "Crying one minute, laughing the next. Ain't natural." A chill crawled down Josiah's spine. He looked to Lila, but she was staring toward the tree line, eyes unfocused. "They ain't crying," she murmured. "They singing." Everyone went still. "What you hear, girl?" Moses asked. She didn't answer, just began to hum, soft and trembling. The tune was old, older than any hymn. Josiah recognized it instantly. It was the same melody Mama Odette used to chant when the moon turned red over the bayou. The same rhythm that called the dead. Josiah grabbed her shoulders. "Stop, don't you do that." Her eyes snapped open, cloudy and strange. "I ain't doing it," she whispered. "They doing it through me." And then the sound came from the swamp itself. A chorus of small voices rose, distant but growing, layered in eerie harmony. It wasn't the joyful song of children, but something warped, too slow, too perfect. It floated through the cane, carried by the river breeze. Everyone backed away except Josiah, who stared into the mist. "They his?" he asked under his breath. Moses shook his head. "No. River don't birth what it can't own. Those belong to the curse now." The singing grew louder. Shapes began to move between the trees, small, human, and dripping wet. They walked in pairs, hand in hand, their heads bowed. Some wore tatters of slave rags, others what looked like baptism gowns, soaked through and blackened. Their faces were pale as river clay, the river's children. Lila stumbled back, clutching her chest. "They comin' for me." Josiah pulled her behind him. "Over my body." The children stopped at the edge of the field, just where the mud turned to grass. Their leader, a small boy with no eyes, just smooth skin, stepped forward. When he opened his mouth, a voice not his own came out, deep, cold, and ancient. Debt still owed. Josiah raised his fists. I paid it in blood. Caldwell gone. The boy tilted his head. Blood spill easy. Debt stay heavy. Lila began to cry, shaking her head. Please, she whispered. Please. I can't. The boy's face twisted, and the other children echoed her words in perfect unison. Please, please, please. The sound became a chant, a mocking reflection. The wind picked up, swirling dust around them. Josiah roared. You ain't taken her. He charged forward, swinging the broken haft of the axe he still carried like a club. The wind slammed against him, pushing him back. The children's forms flickered, half real, half reflection. The boy raised his hand, and the mud beneath Josiah's feet came alive, hands, dozens of them, clawing, gripping, pulling him down. Lila screamed his name. He fought, straining, the muck dragging him knee-deep, then waist-deep. Lila, run! But she didn't move. Instead, she stepped toward the children, her tears cutting paths through the soot on her face. What you want from me? She cried. Ain't we suffered enough? The boy's voice softened, almost gentle. River don't want pain, it want memory. You carry it. Lila shook her head. I can't carry no more. Then it take it for you. The ground split. Water surged upward, swirling around her ankles. Josiah broke free, lunging forward, grabbing her arm. No, you stay with me. The current pulled harder. Her eyes met his, full of terror and love. Josiah, she whispered, let it end. He held tighter. Not without you. Lightning flashed and the river answered. A massive wave of water burst from the swamp, sweeping across the field. It wasn't rain or flood, it was alive, thick with mud and faces, writhing like a serpent. It slammed into them, hurling both to the ground. Josiah felt his grip slip. Lila, he screamed. Her hand tore free. The current swallowed her whole. He stumbled to his knees, choking, clawing through the mud. The water vanished as quickly as it came, sinking back into the earth, leaving silence behind. The children were gone. The air stank of iron. Lila! He ran to the swamp's edge, calling her name over and over, voice breaking. Only the wind replied. Then a ripple on the river's surface, a figure rising slowly from the water. It was her. Lila stood waist-deep, drenched and still, her eyes glowing faint white. Around her feet, the water rippled outward in circles that didn't fade. When she spoke, her voice carried the same layered tone as the river itself. Debt paid. Josiah fell to his knees. Lila. She smiled faintly, the saddest smile he had ever seen. You freed us. And before he could reach her, she dissolved into mist, her shape breaking into 1,000 drops that drifted back into the river, vanishing under the morning light. Josiah screamed until his throat gave out. The Mississippi flowed on, silent, indifferent. The curse had taken its due. That night, he sat alone by the riverbank, the moon reflecting off the dark surface. Somewhere deep beneath it, he thought he heard Lila's voice again, soft, distant, humming that same old melody, the song of the river's children. The sun rose over the Mississippi like an old bruise healing slow. The water glimmered red, the color of rusted memory. Smoke no longer rose from the fields. The plantation had fallen silent, left to its ghosts. The master was gone, the mistress gone, and Lila the only light Josiah had ever known, taken by the same river that gave him justice. He hadn't spoken in 3 days. The others watched him from a distance, whispering prayers and curses under their breath. Some called him cursed, others said he was chosen. Josiah didn't listen to any of it. He sat by the riverbank every night, staring into its slow, deceitful calm, waiting for the current to speak again. On the 4th night, it did. The wind rose with the dusk. Cypress branches rattled like bones, and the frogs fell silent all at once. The surface of the river began to glow faintly, as if catching light from some unseen moon. Josiah stood, his reflection trembling in the water. Why? He whispered. You got what you wanted. Why are you still here? The river answered not in words, but in ripples. From the dark water, shapes began to form, faces he knew, faces long gone. The men and women of the field, the ones beaten, starved, buried without prayer. Their eyes opened in unison, shining with the faint white of the drowned. One of them, a woman with hair like silver moss, spoke in a voice layered with many others. "You think vengeance end when the blood dry?" Josiah shook his head. "It should. It never do," the voices replied. "You feed it. You called it. You kept it alive." He took a step back. "I didn't ask for this. I just wanted justice." "Justice don't belong to men," the river hissed. "Only balance." The faces began to dissolve, but one remained. Lila's. Her eyes glowed brighter than the rest. She looked at him the way she had before the curse soft, knowing. "You broke the chain, Josiah," she said, "but the link that holds it still in you." He fell to his knees, tears streaking his cheeks. "I'd give anything to see you free again." She smiled faintly. "You will, but you can't stay." Before he could answer, the water surged upward, wrapping around him like arms. It wasn't violent, it was almost tender, but cold, so cold that his breath caught in his throat. The river whispered to him in tongues older than sin, one life for one peace. He struggled, gasping, but the water tightened. Visions flashed behind his eyes, the fire, Caldwell's screams, Lila's face dissolving into mist. The river had given him its power, and now it wanted its price. He screamed her name as the current pulled him under. When Josiah woke, the world had changed. He stood in the field, but the sun was gone. The sky above him was endless twilight, blue-gray and humming. The cane rustled without wind. The river still flowed, but it glowed faint from within, like veins of molten gold beneath dark glass. From the distance came singing the same children's song, but softer now, almost peaceful. He followed the sound until he reached the edge of the water. There, by the shore, stood Lila. Her dress shimmered like smoke, her eyes warm again. "You shouldn't have come," she said quietly. He stepped closer. "I had to." She smiled, and the air around her rippled. "You gave too much to hate, Josiah. You forgot to live." He shook his head. "Ain't nothing left to live for without you." Her expression softened, sorrow and love woven together. "Then maybe this is where we start again." The river behind her stirred. Shapes emerged, the river's children, no longer hollow-eyed but glowing faintly, like embers in the dark. They looked at Josiah without malice. One of them reached out a small hand, and when he touched it, warmth spread through his body. He understood then. They weren't the curse anymore. They were its release. Lila turned toward the water. "The river remember pain, but it remember love too. You gave it both." She looked back at him, and for a heartbeat, everything stilled. Then she stepped backward into the current. "Come with me," she said. He hesitated, one last flicker of mortal fear. Then he smiled. "Ain't no world worth walking if you ain't in it." He followed her. The water rose, wrapping around them, light spilling out in waves. For a moment, he felt the weight of every life lost, every scream silenced, every prayer unanswered, and then it lifted. The current carried them both, gentle as a cradle, deeper into the river's heart. At dawn, the others found Josiah's body on the bank, calm-faced, eyes closed, his hand still reaching toward the water. The river ran clear for the first time in years. No mist, no voices. Papa Moses stood over him, hat to his chest. "He paid what no man should have to," he said quietly. A young girl beside him looked up. "He gone now?" Moses nodded. "No, child. He part of the river now." And somewhere deep beneath that calm surface, a faint hum rose, not mournful, not angry, just a song. Lila's song. The song of the river's children, finally at peace. Seasons changed, but the Caldwell plantation never did. The house still stood, stripped bare by time, its paint flaked like dead skin. The wind whistled through broken shutters, carrying whispers that no one dared answer. The cotton fields had turned wild, tangled with cane and kudzu, swallowing the bones of what once was. No one lived there now, no master, no slaves, no overseer's whip cracking across the dawn. Only the ghosts remained. Travelers passing through the delta sometimes caught sight of the place through the fog. They'd quicken their horses, mutter prayers, and swear the windows still glowed faintly at night, the light of lanterns that hadn't burned since 1853. They said the air there was thick, heavy with something that didn't want to be disturbed. They said the river beside it sang when the moon was red, and sometimes, if the wind was right, they heard laughter. A man's deep and tired, a woman's soft and sweet. It was 1870 when the first freedmen tried to reclaim the land. A small group, weary veterans of a freedom that had come too late, led by a preacher named Hiram. He had fought in the Union ranks, seen war's fire, and thought there could be no ghost worse than man. He was wrong. When they arrived, the ground itself seemed to resist them. The soil was damp even in dry season. The trees leaned inward like mourners, and the old slave quarters, half collapsed, half swallowed by vines, felt too alive. Hiram stood before the big house, Bible in one hand, hat in the other. "Lord gave this land back to them that worked it," he declared. "We'll build again where evil once stood." They built cabins near the field, cleared brush, and planted new seed. For a while things were good. The soil was rich, almost too rich. The crops came up strong and green. The river flowed smooth, silver in the moonlight. But then the dreams began. Every night they came. Men woke screaming, drenched in sweat, saying they'd seen a figure walking the fields, tall, shadowed, his hands slick with mud. Others said they saw a woman in white by the river, singing low. The preacher told them to pray. "The devil ain't got no power where faith stands strong," he said. But prayer didn't stop the whispers. One night, a young man named Elias followed the sound to the riverbank. He swore he saw the water part, and two figures walking beneath it, hand in hand, glowing faintly like candlelight in fog. He ran back shouting, "They ain't gone, the river still remember." No one believed him. Until the next morning, when they found the cane fields burned in a perfect circle, not wildfire, but something deliberate, as if marked by unseen hands. In the ash lay patterns, symbols drawn with precision. Hiram knelt beside one and traced it with a trembling finger. It wasn't English, wasn't Latin, but he felt it, deep in his chest, a rhythm older than the world he knew. He packed up that night. "This land ain't ours to till," he told the others. "It still belonged to the ones it took." By dawn, the place was empty again. Years passed. The Delta moved on, swallowing its stories like mud. The world forgot the Caldwells, forgot Josiah and Lila, forgot what vengeance had cost, but not the river. The river never forgets. Sometimes, fishermen still found strange carvings in the bark near the water's edge. Spirals, circles, eyes. The locals said those were Josiah's marks, left to keep balance. They'd toss coins or a drop of rum into the water before crossing, whispering thanks to the spirit that kept evil from spilling beyond the delta. Children were warned not to swim at dusk. "That's when the river choose who it remembers," their mothers would say. And on storm nights, when thunder rolled like hooves and lightning cracked over the cypress, some swore they saw them, two figures by the river, standing still in the downpour. The man, tall, eyes burning faint like embers. The woman, gentle, smiling, both watching, not haunting, guarding. The river was their church now, their tomb, their redemption. In 1893, a writer from New Orleans came to document the haunted plantations of the South. He stayed one night at the Caldwell ruins, setting up his cot in the old master's study. He wrote in his journal before sleeping, "The air hums as if alive, the walls breathe, the sound of water reaches even here, though the river lies half a mile off." That was the last entry he ever made. When they found his body days later, he looked peaceful, as though dreaming. His pen was still in his hand. His journal's final page contained only one line, written in shaky script: "They found peace, and they won't let man take it again." By the turn of the century, the Caldwell plantation was nothing but legend. The cane fields grew thick and untamed, the house fell to ruin, and the road that once led there vanished beneath the swamp. Only the river remained the same, flowing slow, eternal, carrying secrets whispered by those who had once been bound to it. On certain dusks, when the mist rolled thick and gold, some said you could still hear the soft hum of a lullaby rising from the current, and if you listened closely, you might swear it said your name. The river has no memory, they say, but that's a lie told by men who fear what it might whisper back. Every drop carries a name, a wound, a promise. In the Mississippi Delta, the current runs deeper than time. Beneath its calm surface lie centuries of breath and bone, voices rising like mist in the morning. And among them, the name that still hums clearest is Josiah. In the years after the Caldwell place vanished, the land changed hands again and again. Men came with iron tools and bold dreams, trying to force the delta to yield its gold. They drained the swamps, felled the cypress, carved canals that bled into the old river, but every road they laid sank back into mud. Every bridge cracked under unseen pressure. They never lasted long. Some said the land was cursed, others said it was protected, but the old ones, the ones who still remembered the songs their grandmothers whispered at night, they knew the truth. "It ain't a curse," said Mama June, one of the last midwives born in the valley. "It's a keeper." When she was a child, her grandmother had told her stories about the slave who called the river to justice, about how his wife's spirit wove herself into the water, making it sacred again. "Blood washed blood," the old woman had said. "Now the river watch for balance." In 1923, a flood tore through the delta, the worst in memory. Entire towns were drowned, crops ruined, hundreds lost. But when the water finally receded, the area around the old Caldwell plantation stood untouched. The new farmers called it the dry circle. No one could explain it. Geologists came, shook their heads, took notes. Preachers came, fell to their knees, and called it divine protection. Mama June just smiled. She went down to the bank one evening, knelt, and whispered, "Thank you, Josiah. Thank you, Lila." The current shimmered gold in reply, but not everyone showed respect. In 1935, a group of outsiders arrived, developers with plans to build a levee and divert the river. They laughed at the stories. "Old superstitions," one said. "Water don't care about ghosts." They began their work with loud machines and louder mouths, tearing up the old riverbank. Within 3 nights, the first storm hit. The sky turned black, thunder rolled like drums, and the river rose higher than anyone thought possible. It moved like something alive, bending around the levee, crashing through their camp. When dawn came, the machines were gone, buried beneath silt and water. One of the men was found clinging to a cypress root, mumbling through cracked lips. They were standing there, in the water, a man and a woman, just watching. He left Mississippi and never spoke again. The decades rolled on. The world forgot again, as it always does, but the river didn't. By the 1,960 seconds, only a few remembered the story. Blues singers carried pieces of it in their songs, verses about a man who sold his soul to the river, a woman who turned to mist to save him. Preachers rebranded it into sermons about divine justice. Poets rewrote it in hidden metaphors, but the truth stayed where it belonged, beneath the current. Sometimes, fishermen on quiet nights swore they felt something tug their line, not fish, not driftwood, but a pulse. And if they were respectful, the water would release it. If they were not, the river would take. In 1987, a historian named Dr. Lena Carter came from Chicago to study African spiritual syncretism in post-slavery America. Her research led her to whispers about the Caldwell haunting. She found records of a plantation burned in 1853, an overseer's mysterious death, and mention of 2 missing slaves, Josiah and Lila. She followed the trail south until she reached the delta. There, guided by a half-blind ferryman, she found the ruins, or what was left of them, moss-covered stones, fragments of iron, a single porch post wrapped in vines, and the river, always the river. She camped nearby, taking notes, sketching. On her 3rd night, as she sat by the fire, she heard it, the faint hum of a woman's voice carried on the breeze. Then, another voice joined, deep, calm, sorrowful. Her tape recorder picked up nothing but static, but her journal that night contained one line, written in haste. "They are still together. The river remembers them." She returned to Chicago and published her paper, Voodoo Justice, Oral Myths of the Mississippi Delta. It gained her praise in universities but disbelief from peers. "You sound like you believe it," one critic said. She only smiled. "Belief has nothing to do with it. I've seen what memory looks like when it flows." Now, nearly 2 centuries later, the river still moves slow, unbroken, unchanged. The world around it hums with engines, towers, and lights. But down in the delta, things remain older. The air tastes of iron. The cypress still whisper. And sometimes, when fog curls across the surface at dawn, it shapes itself into the faint silhouette of 2 figures, a man with shoulders broad as trees, a woman with eyes soft as candlelight. They do not haunt, they do not judge, they keep watch. The locals say the river protects those who respect it, punishes those who defile it. That's its way, old justice, deeper than any man's law. And when the storms come, as they always do, the water rises high but never overflows the dry circle, the land where Josiah fell. Some nights, you can still hear singing, not words, just sound, low, steady, eternal, a lullaby, for the lost, for the free, for the memory of vengeance turned to peace, because the river remembers everything, every scream, every prayer, every love, every promise kept and broken. And if you listen closely enough, really listen, it'll tell you the story of Josiah and Lila, how pain became power, how vengeance became mercy, how even in death, love found its way home. The river remembers, and because it remembers, it forgives.